The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcast articles and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. Previously on our podcast, we featured an interview with our CEO, Bob Chapman, by this episode's guest, Jane Adshead-Grant. Jane has been an executive coach and mentor for almost 20 years. Based in the UK, Jane was recently in St. Louis working with Bob and Cynthia Chapman's nonprofit. While in the U.S., Jane sat down with BW's Director of Communications, Mary Rudder, for a conversation about the changing landscape of leadership. So here's Mary Rudder and Jane Adshead-Grant.
So I work mostly in professional and financial services, and so my clients typically are bankers, lawyers, and consultants. And they sit from both ends of the spectrum of leadership. So emerging leaders who are stepping into perhaps their first role, leading a group of people, or perhaps the first global role. And then at the other end of the spectrum, experienced leaders who've been in the role for a long time, but actually it's that old saying is what's gotten them to where they are now isn't what's going to take them for the next 5-10 years of their working life, because things have changed. The environment has changed massively, even from when I started working, and therefore their approach to leadership needs to shift. And they found the senior leaders I'm working with are coming to me and saying, I really am stuck. How do I engage my team to perform well? How can I be for them? Well, the challenges I ask them is around how do you need to be? There's this real shift between what do we need to do as a leader? So we need to do the strategic planning, we need to do the communication plan. And yet this sense of being is the work that I love to do and help people at that transformational level, is taking the information of what we do into the transformation of how we be. And so I work with leaders to tap into that. How do I need to be as a leader in order to generate an environment for my team members to really flourish?
And so how have things changed? And why have they changed? Why do they have to lead differently these days?
So in my experience, I think it's a number of things. I think the impact of technology has had a huge shift of the way we are as individuals. Some people fear the advancement of technology and some people embrace it. And I think that's one of the mindsets, is to think about technology as how can we capitalize on it and at the same time keep that human connection. Because I think technology has advanced many ways of our work, how we become more effective and can become more productive. But equally, we can become addicted to technology and social media and things like this that can be detrimental. So I think technology has had a huge impact. And I think one of the things about things like artificial intelligence, people are becoming fearful of their own jobs and what that might mean for them in the future. And my encouragement is not to be fearful, but think about the opportunity that it could give. So if you start to embrace the technology and have the mindset of opportunity rather than fear, actually it's very liberating. The other thing that's changed is globalization. So now, as we work with international global organizations, we travel more and we're working across borders. Myself, based in the UK, and working with my colleagues here in the US. One of the things that I'm on different time zones, so my day extends, and then you put travel on top of that, and we end up being on 24/7. So one of the challenges for leaders is how do I manage those boundaries so that I can also take care of myself, so that I can take care of my team members. So if I'm jumping on a plane and 24 hours later I'm straight into an office environment and I've had 2 hours sleep because of the jet lag or whatever, and then straight into working, that can be tough on the individual. And that's where we see this extended level of globalization being on all the time. So those are a couple of things that I've seen together with the constant change in our environment.
Mm-hmm. Do your leaders express any challenges with, the generations which they lead? You know, it's sort of the millennial question.
It's interesting, because I hear people say they're very different and their needs are different. Actually, I don't know that they are. From my experience of working with the younger generation, they are passionate about working for an organization that is clear about their purpose and not just about the bottom line financially. Millennials are asking for more than that. How do we serve society? Where are we adding to the environment? Where are we doing good in the world? Because that is a pull for them. And also they want more flexibility and they want more autonomy. So how I work, when I work, where I work. And then when I work with the really senior leaders, they want the same things. And so, but the bit in the middle is how do we now structure our organizations and way of working so that we can generate the best in others to provide those opportunities for more autonomy, connection with our team members, because who we work with is really critical to the happiness and levels of work we have. I work with leaders on a one-on-one executive coaching relationship, and that would be over a 6-month period. And I work with leaders who come to me because they want to develop their leadership to become more people-centric, because when we look at the business world, we think about what it's about. It's all about people. In every business, in some shape or form, is about people. And so the interesting thing I find is that individuals have been through to business school and through their work experience have been taught some of the technical aspects of leadership, the visioning, the strategic thinking, and yet when it comes to leading people, that's often the missing bit in there. So the coaching I do is really focusing on their people leadership. How do they inspire their team members? How do they engage their team members? How do they understand and get to know and connect with their team members so that they can create this environment? My approach to coaching is to create an environment where they can think for themselves. And Mary, you really inspired me on one of your latest podcasts when the gentleman asked you, where do you do your best thinking? And you're saying in the bathroom, in the shower. And people do. I mean, that often is that. And what I was really fueled up by that is to think and say, and what I love to do is to help people do their best thinking at work, as well as in the shower. But doing it at work where you are in an environment where your thoughts, your ideas are welcomed because of the difference you bring, that you are considered as an equal in your capacity to think. Mm-hmm. We may have our differences through experiences, through longevity, and that's what we can celebrate. But the work that I do with my leaders in coaching them is to create this environment where they can think for themselves, as themselves, rather than having to conform to what anyone else wants them to be. And so this generates a much more expansive and creative self where they feel more valued and have breakthroughs.
Well, that's fascinating because I find that it's challenging at work to have that mind space to do that thinking, especially with the way we work these days. Your phone's ringing, your cell phone's dinging, your emails are coming in. The pace is so much faster, and that's why, when you are in a space where you're just letting your mind be free when you're in the shower, you're taking a walk, you're going for a run, all of those things create that mind space. But that's interesting. I would like to hear how you help them do that in the work environment.
So it takes two people, because one of the proponents of creating an environment for them to think well for themselves with courage, with rigor, and with imagination is attention. And it's about how do we give attention to one another with this palpable respect for who they are and what they're saying, rather than a listening to reply. And so when we're giving people this attention, what it does, it enables the brain to work more effectively and more creatively. And I've just come away from working with the nonprofit part of Barry-Wehmiller, Our Community Listens, and it's been an absolute privilege to spend 2 days helping this group of incredible people to do just what I've shared, to think for themselves as themselves, to share with them how do we be with one another to generate that best thinking. So this time we were away from the office, so we were free from the interruption, the distraction of all the things you shared about. And so we have that opportunity, so we can have like a retreat or a timeout that we have carved out to do that kind of thinking. But just to your point, how do you bring this in our everyday life? Because I think this is the reality. as you described it. We're going from meeting to meeting. We have phone calls, and our phone is constantly beeping. For me, it takes discipline, Mary. And one of the things that I was sharing with this group, and I work with my clients, because they'll say to me, this is the only time this week that you give me this time to think, Jane. So I hold my coaching sessions as sacred space, because I get more done in my hour with you than I do in a week. And so how we do that is to create this environment by the way that how we show up, the intention we give, the listening that is free of interruption, free of judgment, being at ease with one another, so I'm free of the internal rush and I've got another meeting. Right now, when I'm generating their best thinking, it's being in this way and holding this sense of equality and encouraging someone to continue thinking well for themselves. And we can do it in tiny blocks.
That sounds easy, but it's really challenging, I bet. How do you get them to get in that space to begin with? And then how do you sort of create this muscle memory about how to do that when they're not in your space?
So first of all, I'll invite them to, so if it's a one-on-one coaching, it's how I'm being. So I'm creating the environment for them, being these set of sort of behaviors that I shared earlier, the attention, being at ease, having a sense of equality, appreciation. So I'm appreciating who they are and the qualities they have. But how to get that muscle and take it back into their workplace is a great question. One of the most common structures we have at work is that of meetings. And so I run a program called Transforming Meetings, whereby I share with a group of people, how do you generate this in 1 hour? And what we do is we find that breaking into pairs can liberate thinking of a group. And so having small triads or just in pairs, 5 minutes each way of thinking time will liberate the group's thinking. And bringing then that back to an open discussion to think about what's our freshest thinking on a topic. And so what I have found is working with people in this way to how they get it into the muscle is they experience it from me through a one-on-one coaching, but equally I'll take it into an organization to run a Transforming Meetings program, and I'll introduce them to the applications that they can use, working in pairs, having an open discussion, building on these way of being behaviors that can create this space for thinking. And in fact, the outcomes have been they achieve more in less time because of the disciplined approach.
And does something like that work in an environment where people are not physically there and they are Skyping in? And so those are the challenges where we don't actually see each other a lot. We're working in these virtual environments.
Yeah. That's a lovely question, and yes, it does. And I also hold virtual meetings in this way, and the approach I'm talking about is an approach called the thinking environment, which has been pioneered by Nancy Klein. And we've had phenomenal success around the world with this approach now. And that virtual piece is that we would create a virtual meeting. And one of the ways to invite everybody's thinking and ideas is we hold rounds. So even if we're on a virtual call, we will sometimes draw a virtual table and let people know where they are on that table. Literally, I'll ask people to draw a table and then just, okay, Mary's here, Jane's there, etc. around the table. And then take it in turns to share their thoughts and ideas afresh. And then we build on the group's thinking. And so what we do is to keep the sense of that space and that discipline, we have some principles. So a principle number 1 is that everybody matters, so everybody will have a turn to share their thoughts and ideas. Principle number 2 is that we still, even on a virtual call, something as effective as Zoom, we can go off and have a mini pair thinking in just 5 minutes and then come back to the main group. Mm-hmm. So we can use technology to expedite that thinking. We will also challenge assumptions as part of a principle of how do we generate the best thinking. And so by challenging each other's assumptions, that can liberate us in order to move forward and accomplish more by being open and helping people understand that. So it does work effectively virtually as well as person to person. But people love the human connection. And I've just noticed that recently in working with teams across the globe, that human connection is what makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other things that the pain points of, are you seeing some trends in your clients? Things that they're like, okay, Jane, here's what I need help with.
Yeah, I think one of them is that piece around change. So how do I lead through change? And we've heard about the VUCA environment and how to navigate that kind of volatility and uncertainty. And for me, the idea of navigating through change is this idea of what kind of mindset do we need to be in. And there's this beautiful analogy which they call living above and below the line. I don't know if you've come across that before, but you know, for me, when we're navigating change, and it is something that I think we all can and have the capacity to do, but it's just not a natural human response. Even though we say we like it, actually it's tough. But it's around the mindset. So we can either fall victim to change, and the way of behaving will be around blame, about excuses, and even denial, or we can be in more of a victor kind of mode, whereby we're taking responsibility and accountability for ourselves in that change. The thing to really recognize, and what I love to help my clients with, is recognizing they have choice. So if you want to be above the line, this is about taking responsibility, holding accountability for the change that you have, the influence that you have over the situation that you find yourself in. Or do you want to live below the line when you're falling into that victim mode of blame and denial, etc. So that's a really common theme that I find right now with leadership, is how do I navigate the change?
And I think part of it is, again, back to the generational, the aspect of it. The older generations, change is a little more difficult, and the younger generation, that's all they've ever known. Change is, they do things my teenage sons, my college-age sons, change happens to them immediately, and I'm always amazed at how quickly they can move on in their mind and then just embrace it. And whereas I'm still trying to think about it and be okay with it, and they've already made the change and move on. So I do think as we go forward, there's so much discussion right now about how to navigate change and change management, and I think it's going to become more less and less difficult to help change throughout an organization, because the leaders will have grown up just being able to navigate change.
The future of work is going to look very different, not only with a generation gap, but the generations are going to flip, and by 2030 it's going to be hugely different, not only with technology but also who are our leaders. And as you said, they've grown up in a very different environment. One of the things that I really hope for, though, is that people don't lose the human connection, because as I mentioned earlier, I think the impact of technology is huge, and if we can embrace that. But let's not forget that one of the things that artificial intelligence will never replace is creativity and empathy. And I think if we can help our leaders, from the beginning of education all the way through, from, at school, and to understanding these people skills, how do we relate to one another? How do we listen with empathy? How do we create the environment to help generate the best thinking in others? These are the skills that I really hope that we can focus on to really equip our leaders of the future, so that work becomes a place where people feel fulfilled and they really enjoy it. It's got to be a place we spend such a long time there. And I think it's really important that we take that responsibility for any of us who have the privilege of, working with others who come to support our vision.
What are some of the things that are having impact from the Leadership Institute on your clients?
Well, huge impact. So I've up until now really specialised in a one-on-one executive coaching and kind of small leading teams piece for the clients I work with. And being part of the BWLI Institute has given me the opportunity to really spread this wonderful gift of truly human leadership in the UK and Europe. And through opening up and leading larger classes. So with the programs of Inspire and Relate, I'm now able to offer this to a bigger audience. And so for me, this is a huge opportunity to reach more people and have a greater impact. And the gift of the Institute is the content, and as I mentioned earlier, it's the structure of the programs that really land with people. And then it complements my coaching. So people that come on our programs are then interested in taking it back into their organization, which is what I hope to do. And the coaching the senior leaders in that organization to really embed the programs that I teach now at the bigger level. So that's been a huge gift to do that.
Can you speak a little bit about the actually mechanics of what you bring from the Leadership Institute to your clients?
It shows up in different ways. So one of the mechanics is the actual program itself. So a 1 or 2 day program, and how do you inspire your team members? So that would be one way of doing it. So either an open program, so different leaders in organizations can come. And one of the benefits of that is bringing together or connecting people from different organizations. The other is bringing that internally. So that's helping an organization to really remove some silos, because when you start to bring people in across the organization, that creates a greater connection and improved communication. The other tangible thing it's really helped me with is when I'm coaching on one-on-one, some practical skill building that will help a client. And so, for example, one of the difficult parts, or some of the more challenging things, is having difficult conversations. And those might be simply around giving feedback on somebody's performance that you would like to change. And so the Institute have developed an amazing model for giving feedback that is just really helpful. And so I share that as a practical skill build with one of my clients, for example. My approach to coaching is I'll always start with generating their thinking first. So I would always encourage them. And then if and only if they need any input from me, I will offer something that is in service of them thinking more on what they want to achieve. And so some of the models that I've learned from the Leadership Institute have really augmented my one-on-one coaching to continue to share the message of truly human leadership and build leaders for future, of how they can generate this culture where our children, Mary, and our others can really flourish.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you hit upon. You just hit upon what was going to be my next question of, you really share the passion that we have throughout Barry-Wehmiller to really use this as a platform to really build a better world. What's going to be the key in making that happen?
I think there's an idea that as we begin to share the message of what it means to be a truly human leader, to take the responsibility of leadership, and be this great steward of people who have been entrusted to us, what I see time and time again is there are a few role models that enable our future generation to be this way. And so for me, it's about how do we role model this way of being in the world. And it isn't just at work. It's how we show up in everyday life, how we are as a parent, how we are in our communities. And so for me, the key would be, it starts with us. We need to role model this way of being in the world. And I think we need to be proactive in going out into communities and organizations, maybe where it isn't there now. And that's hard. But then if you want to make a difference and change things, it's never easy. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. Mm-hmm. But that's part of the challenge and part of the excitement of this opportunity, I think. So I was recently given the opportunity to work in the prison chaplaincy. And this has been one of the greatest challenges I've experienced so far. And I have had the privilege of sitting in front of a group of 70 men who would be desperate to be listened to be cared for in a very difficult time in their life. And so for me, that was a huge growth opportunity and expansion of how do I bring a listening approach into a community where many of them have never ever been listened to before or even cared for before, to help them think about how could I make a different decision in my life to have a better outcome in my life. And so for me, that was an opportunity. The key would be to seek out opportunities of where we can be this way in the world, to shine the light and perhaps kindle a flame.
So at the end of the day, Jane, executive coach, facilitator, world changer, you're a mom and a spouse. So what has all this meant to Jane, the human being? What impact has this had on your life?
Huge. I'm privileged to be mum of 2 beautiful teenage girls and wife to Ed, and our growing together as a family has been phenomenal, and really employing this way of being with them has enabled our children to grow and to flourish in an environment where they often say to me, "Hey Mum, you're the only one that really listens to me." And I find that has really rubbed off on them, because their friends are saying, "Hey, I love it, because I feel that you really listen to me." And so this kind of role modeling at home has really impacted their lives as well. And I think it's also given us an opportunity. My husband is really generous and very encouraging of the work that I do, and I think I'm very blessed to have that support. So, to be here, traveling and doing much more of that than I ever did before is because he's very supportive of what I do. And he wants to make a difference in the world. So I think it's really impacted us in a really positive way.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.